First up today, we have some pretty cool pictures from a community member of ours, shout out to Mark, of the rear Gigacast in a Model Y, and you'll note this green line. I think this is really important because there's that narrative out there that Teslas with Gigacasts are going to be nearly impossible to repair, but that may not be the case. Essentially, there are multiple different points on these Gigacasts where you can actually have these lines, again, in multiple locations, that are actually cut with a jig that costs around $40,000. But then certain parts of this Gigacast can actually be replaced with one of these black rails, as they call it. So in a sense, this can actually make these Gigacasts somewhat modular because you can cut them in certain locations and replace certain pieces or parts, the ones of course that have been damaged. So you can actually cut the Gigacast at different locations, then you take these replacement rails, slide it into place, weld it back together, and then put the car back together. And here's a picture of one of those replacement rails. And why this is such a big deal, because that whole narrative that, well, if even part of the Gigacast gets damaged, then you have to throw out the whole thing, it's really not true because they are modular in this sense. So there you have it. I thought this was pretty awesome and worth passing along. Again, thank you, Mark. We have some really good work here from Autopilot that gives us insight into potentially when we might see some Cybertruck initial deliveries. You can pause if you really want to dive into this. I just want to highlight these two columns, the initial time when Tesla submits the VIN decoders to NHTSA, and then when they actually have those first deliveries, which oftentimes go to employees first. And Tesla does that so that first batch of deliveries is with employees, and if something goes wrong, they can keep it in-house and then fix what needs to be adjusted. But the takeaway, the shortest time frame that we've seen from Tesla so far has been 80 days between when they submit those VIN decoders to NHTSA and when those deliveries start. So let me be clear, this guarantees absolutely nothing, but there's a world where we don't actually get a delivery event sometime into November. Just thought it was worth mentioning because I think a lot of people are now starting to expect it in the next few weeks, and that's also not a guarantee. And with this one, let's be careful, but definitely think it's worth passing along, and it confirms some of the things I've been thinking about. User on Reddit says, from 10 to 20 feet away, Cybertrucks look good, but up close, all of the exterior plastics are ungrained and some on the interior surfaces too. The software and firmware really are not ready to be seen by the public either. I say this as someone directly involved with Cybertruck production. There are still some changes for it slated to come before production units as well. So I definitely could be wrong, but I'm still guessing that all of these trucks we're seeing across the country are not destined for customers, and they're not even destined for employees yet. They're really just pre-production variants. And it makes sense, right? They would still want to be testing these vehicles, whether it's crash testing or their own internal testing, which they do a lot of, because the actual production line at Giga Texas has only been up and running and producing these vehicles for a very short amount of time. So they would want to have weeks under their belt before starting to give these vehicles to customers. And this was just awesome, shared by Sawyer. I don't know where he found it, but it was a police department that said, while on patrol this morning, one of our units spotted a few car haulers loaded with some strange trucks traveling northbound on the I-5. The takeaway though, they say, I wonder what they are. So do they really not know that these are Cybertrucks? A good reminder, we're all so clued in, but most of the general public is still clueless about what's coming. This is just too good. Matt Smith highlighted something that was pretty awesome. He highlighted electricity prices from ERCOT were around $2,000 per megawatt hour in most locations, up from the typical $20 to $50. But for as long as prices are in that range, discharging one Tesla Megapack is equivalent to about $7,800, or about 0.3% of the total capital cost of a Megapack. Now, of course, we shouldn't extrapolate these electricity rates, but if things were to stay the same, that's only about 256 discharge cycles to basically pay off the cost of one of these Megapacks, assuming a $2 million cost. And these Megapacks, especially using LFP cells, should be capable of cycles well exceeding 10,000 plus. Tesla Economics posted about Tesla's HEPA filters, and Elon responded saying, yeah, we should probably advertise that more. If you missed it, Dirty Tesla showed us Hardware 3 versus Hardware 4 cameras at night, and it's a stark difference. Here we have Hardware 3 at night, and here's the same scene on Hardware 4. Hardware 3, Hardware 4. Awesome. This afternoon, Moneyball, an account who we've now used as a source for years, has said the Model 3 old a new version. The pre-order is valid for 60 days. If OEM does not make delivery in 60 days due to the revamped Highland Model 3 entering the market, the client can take the deposit back or take the new version based on a new arrangement. This all coming from a Tesla salesperson in China, so just one more anecdote to keep in mind. You may recall a few months back, we talked about the Tesla Solar Roof lawsuit that was finally going to be put to bed. Well, apparently it looks like a judge has rejected that settlement deal. Both Tesla and the homeowners involved in this lawsuit must provide more information about that $6 million class settlement. That's all we have for now, but I'm sure we'll hear more in the weeks ahead. A German source published this article talking about the top 10 water consumers in Brandenburg, and Tesla is not on the list, despite what many of the environmentalists have been arguing over the past few years. It sounds like a coal company is actually using the most water in the region at 44.8 million cubic meters just last year. And scrolling all the way down, we'll find Giga Berlin may consume a maximum of 1.8 million cubic meters per year. And maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any of those environmentalists attacking that coal company for water use. A Reddit user shared their experience completing the FSD transfer for this quarter. Wanted to pass it along, pause if you'd like, but some people were saying that Tesla has been taking away FSD a week before you take delivery of your new vehicle, and this one anecdote said that is not true. They said they had FSD on their Model 3 up until the moment they pressed accept delivery on their new Model Y, and you have ample time to inspect the vehicle interior and exterior before accepting delivery. Then once you press accept delivery and get in your new car, it will take a few minutes, but the new car will restart itself, and then FSD hardware will be enabled in the new car and removed from the old car. But you must have both cars in your Tesla app for the FSD to transfer. And here's a subtle but still very nice feature on Tesla's new universal charger.
And for the first time, I'm going to see if this Magic Dock universal wall connector releases, because I was a little concerned when the unit came and I couldn't remove it from the body of the unit, but I assumed that it needed to be powered up, that the locking mechanism was in the closed position so you couldn't take it out. So let's see, I should be able to push this tab in and release it. And as soon as I pushed the tab in, I heard the locking mechanism release. So here you go. Here is the AC version of Tesla's Magic Dock. The tab here, now let's see if I can remove it. I can't. Nope. It's locked to the Tesla connector, to the NACS connector, which is how you would want it to be. You wouldn't want somebody to be able to steal this in public.
We have Lamborghini announcing its first full electric vehicle, but not entering production until 2028. And I would add if it does, because they're labeling this a concept vehicle. We don't get much in the way of specs other than it should have over 1,300 horsepower, and that they're saying this should be a 2-door but a 4-seat vehicle. The glaring challenge for a company like Lambo will be convincing its core customer base that EVs are worthy of their investment. From a styling perspective, what do you guys think? It's definitely different and I kind of like it. But again, not until 2028, and if that, that's not great. We got a new Tesla stock note from Morgan Stanley. One takeaway, it's not just Tesla that's pulling different demand levers for EVs. There are many other EV makers that are also pulling different subsidy levers. But the point I want to drive home next has to do with all of this overcapacity in China. Everybody and their brother right now are talking about investor concerns over China's post-pandemic recovery, specifically in the auto market. We've also talked about industry consolidation and how many of the legacy OEM players are facing steep discounts in their Chinese auto sales, and now they're partnering up with local Chinese players to try to right the ship. But they note Ford brand sales excluding Lincoln in China are down 82% since 2016. Not only do legacy OEMs have to face tough EV competition in China from Tesla and BYD, who are vertically integrated, they also have to reverse the trend of decreasing sales volume, profit, and share in a decelerating domestic market. And the chart's tough to see, but the takeaway is not. Tesla and BYD alone represent about 40% of the Chinese EV market. And what have we been talking about on the channel now for a year? As the largest, most saturated EV market in the world, a deceleration of the Chinese domestic EV market has increased investor questions about a potential release of Chinese supply into the export market, potentially years ahead of expectations. Bloomberg also just put out a piece on these EV graveyards over in China that we've been talking about, just highlighting they're mostly from failed rideshare companies and all of this oversupply and overcapacity from explosive growth the past 3 years in the Chinese market. Listen to this. Over the last 4 years, 400 different EV startups in the Chinese market have gone out of business. We went from 500 in 2019 down to 100 today. And most likely, there will be even more consolidation in the years to come. From Benchmark Mineral Intelligence in July, Chinese EV sales fell 5.6% month over month as the country's economy tipped into deflation, again what Cathie Wood has been talking about. Lower demand growth means some Chinese producers now face a worsening overcapacity issue, and this is greatest among the midstream players, but it's also affecting tier 2 and 3 cell, cathode, and car makers who cannot yet export to Western markets. It's pretty simple. If the biggest EV market in the world does experience a huge slowdown driven by macro factors, well, Tesla's not going to be immune to those fears, as a lot of the market does trade in a basket, whether it's right or wrong. Some more data from Benchmark. The IRA has already led to over $110 billion of capital investments announced for clean energy manufacturing projects, including over $70 billion towards EV and battery supply chains across the US. And we know LFP is going to be a huge part of our EV future, and the North American capacity for cheaper LFP cell production is expected to grow significantly across the decade, with 155.9 gigawatt hours of pipeline capacity out to 2030. And with the IRA, Tesla and Panasonic are set to be some of the main beneficiaries, in line to receive $41 billion in tax credits by the end of 2032.
So probably one of the good examples of that would be like Tesla. So in their Megapack and Powerwall products, they are essentially using the same NCM cells that they were using in their EVs. And then what we saw happen 2021, I'd say, was the real kind of turning point where we started to see this almost shift around what's actually kind of important for stationary storage, and kind of the key things being safety and being cost. We saw a number of battery fires that happened throughout kind of the early 2020s, quite a few in Korea. We also saw kind of quite a famous one happen in Australia. And on the back of that, we started to see an increased number of players really kind of announce their shift towards LFP. That came both from the kind of system integrator side of things, but also from kind of being pushed by the developers in some cases, where they made announcements around, okay, we're only going to use LFP cells, or we're only going to purchase LFP cells and systems from now on. So things really started to take a kind of shift from 2021 onwards. And now this market is really kind of heavily swinging towards LFP. So year to date, we're looking at about 75% LFP market share, with the remainder being kind of a mix between some NCM, particularly on the kind of behind the meter applications. Some of the Korean manufacturers still have relatively good market share there. And then also a little bit of lead acid that's still being used in a number of different regions, particularly for applications such as telecoms and data centers. Lead acid is still quite a popular choice there.
And for Tesla, when we think about cost of goods sold and different export hubs, always keep in mind the price of lithium battery cells in China right now could be as much as 15% cheaper than those in North America. And Tesla potentially adding India as a future export hub with low cost of labor could be a really nice addition. Hope you guys have a wonderful and a safe weekend. You can find me on X and Instagram linked below. Please like the video if you did, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.